Welcome to the NEAF Podcast, written and presented by the Rockland Astronomy Club. This month's podcast takes us on a deep dive on what we can expect to see at the 2026 Northeast Astronomy Forum. Whether you're a backyard observer with a trusty Dobsonian or a deep sky imager chasing the perfect exposures, you know that the heartbeat of the hobby is at the Northeast Astronomy Forum. I'm thrilled to introduce your guides for today's journey through the stars. Joining us first is our very own Julian Enberts. And alongside him, we have Ilana Mikhailov. Julian, Ilana, take it away.
In April 2026, the person who designed the optical filters currently scanning the cosmos for alien life, well, they might be standing right behind you in line for a hot dog.
Yeah, which is just a wild thing to think about.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the bizarre, brilliant reality of the event we're exploring today. I want you to picture this environment where the absolute greatest minds in modern astrophysics are literally bumping elbows with someone who, just unpacked their very first backyard telescope.
Right, totally.
It's loud, it is intensely enthusiastic, and it is entirely dedicated to looking up. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Thanks for having me. It really is a rare ecosystem. You do not often find a physical space where high-level theoretical science directly intersects with everyday accessible curiosity.
Yeah, usually those are kept totally separate, right?
Exactly. Usually those two worlds are kept strictly separated by university walls or, high security clearances.
And breaking down those walls is exactly our mission today. We are unpacking what makes the upcoming 35th annual Northeast Astronomy Forum and Space Expo the world's largest and most spectacular astronomy and space expo.
It really lives up to the hype.
It does. We have this massive stack of sources here detailing the schedules, the speaker rosters, the engineering on the showroom floor, and obviously the history behind it all. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's establish the when and the where for you listening.
Right. So the main event is scheduled for April 11th and 12th, 2026.
Got it.
And the venue is Rockland Community College in New York. The whole operation is produced by the Rockland Astronomy Club, which is this award-winning organization that was actually founded back in 1958.
Wow, so they've been doing this a long time.
Oh, yeah. Over the decades, they've refined this event to the point where it annually draws more than 4,000 professionals, amateurs, and, just pure space enthusiasts into one massive venue.
Now, a quick housekeeping note for you listening. When you inevitably look this up online or see it in print, you are going to see the acronym spelled NEAF. And while you should definitely know the community pronounces it NE, yes, with a long E, I strongly prefer to use its majestic full name.
The Northeast Astronomy Forum.
Exactly, because NEAF sounds like, a brand of generic sandwich bread.
Yeah, I can see that.
Right. But the Northeast Astronomy Forum sounds like an ancient academy where you go to unlock the mechanics of the universe.
The full title certainly carries more gravity, I'll give you that. And gravity, or perhaps the defiance of it, is kind of the underlying theme of the entire weekend.
Oh, I like that.
But to understand how all these people actually interact, we need to look at the physical architecture of the event.
Right, because before we get to the legendary speakers, the astronauts and the orbital mechanics, you have to visualize the exhibition hall.
It's massive.
It's basically a Comic-Con for the cosmos. We are talking about a space that spans the size of 2 professional football fields.
Yeah, 90,000 square feet.
Exactly. It is a shopping and educational paradise featuring over 120 vendors from all around the world. But it's not just like a giant retail space where people are blindly swiping credit cards for telescopes.
No, far from it. The floor plan is structured much more like a teaching hospital.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Yeah, because in a teaching hospital, the theoretical lectures happen just down the hall from the practical hands-on surgery, right?
Right.
Here, attendees have access to 2 main theaters hosting the NEAF talks, which feature world-class speakers. But step out of the theater and you're immediately immersed in pro-am workshops,
where professionals and amateurs actively collaborate on data, and the sources highlight quite a few specific activities, too.
Yeah, they really pack the schedule.
For the highly technical crowd, there is the Northeast Astroimaging Conference, referred to as NAIC, which actually runs right before the main event on April 9th and 10th.
Right.
And then during the main weekend, you've got dedicated beginners classes, full planetarium shows, and actual solar viewing setups outside.
They also have a newly expanded kids area, which is really cool. It features a Meet an Astronaut opportunity.
Oh, wow, for the kids.
Yeah, alongside massive raffles and amazing door prizes.
That's incredible.
And that solar viewing you mentioned, That is a perfect example of that teaching hospital dynamic.
How so?
Well, you aren't just looking at the sun through a standard piece of tinted glass, Vendors set up these specialized hydrogen alpha telescopes.
Hydrogen alpha, okay.
Yeah, these instruments isolate a very specific wavelength of red light emitted by glowing hydrogen. And that allows you to actually see solar prominences.
Like solar flares.
Basically, yeah. Massive loops of plasma erupting off the surface of the sun in real time.
Okay, but I need to push back on this layout for a second. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of someone who doesn't know what a hydrogen alpha filter is.
Okay, fair enough.
You walk into this cavernous room. Over there is a NASA engineer discussing plasma loops. Here are 120 vendors selling highly complex deep sky imaging gear. And down the hall is a beginner's class on how to, point a tube at the moon.
What's fascinating here is how the astronomical community inherently views observation. Unlike many other highly technical fields, astronomy relies heavily on crowdsourced data from amateurs.
Really? Even today?
Oh, absolutely. A teenager in their backyard with a mid-range telescope is often the first person to spot a newly appearing comet or a supernova.
Just because professional observatories can't monitor the entire sky at once.
Precisely. So the professionals actually need the amateurs looking up.
Okay, that makes sense.
The event physically bridges the gap. Because the gap isn't a hierarchy, it's a partnership. When you walk up to a vendor booth to ask about a tracking mount, the robotic base that slowly rotates a telescope to counter the Earth's rotation so your target stays in view.
Right.
Well, you aren't just talking to a salesperson. You are often talking to the mechanical engineer who designed the gears.
Oh, wow.
Putting beginners right next to the experts demystifies the science. It takes these intimidating abstract concepts and puts the physical tools to measure them directly into your hands.
The tools definitely become less intimidating when the person who milled the aluminum is standing right there showing you how to calibrate it.
Exactly.
But as incredible as telescopes and deep sky imaging equipment are, they're ultimately just tools. I mean, they are glass, silicon, and metal.
Sure.
To me, the true draw of this forum is the human element. It is the people who have actually left our atmosphere to use those tools in the vacuum of space.
Oh, and the astronaut roster confirmed for 2026 is a testament to that.
It's really stacked.
It is. We are talking about veteran NASA astronauts who represent critical eras of spaceflight. For instance, Don Pettit is attending.
Oh, I've seen videos of him.
Yeah, he's renowned not just for his time on the International Space Station, but for his ingenuity in zero gravity. He actually invented a zero-G coffee cup using the principles of fluid dynamics.
Which is just the most human thing ever. I'm in space, but I really need my coffee.
Exactly. And they also have Anna Fisher, another pioneering NASA astronaut.
Right, and her background in chemistry brought a really rigorous scientific methodology to early space shuttle missions.
Yes. And then there is Hoot Gibson.
Hoot Gibson.
Gibson's inclusion is particularly notable. The sources list his flight history as STS-41B, STS-61C, STS-27, STS-47, and STS-71.
That's a lot of acronyms.
Right, so for those unfamiliar, STS stands for Space Transportation System, which was NASA's official designation for the Space Shuttle program.
Okay.
Gibson commanded 4 of those 5 missions.
Wait, 5 times. 5 times strapping into a controlled explosion.
Yeah, it's wild to think about.
That is a flight history spanning over a decade of spaceflight evolution. When we talk about pushing boundaries, whether it is the future of lunar exploration or probing deeper into the solar system, we're talking about his legacy.
Absolutely.
Because leaving low Earth orbit and heading toward the far side of the moon requires mapping the unknown. And these are the explorers who actually physically touched that frontier.
They lived it.
So what does this all mean? Why is it fundamentally different for an attendee to sit in that theater and hear about an STS mission from Hoot Gibson rather than just reading a detailed textbook on shuttle aerodynamics?
It comes down to the translation of raw telemetry into human consequence.
Human consequence. I like that.
Yeah, because the textbook gives you the orbital mechanics. It tells you that a space shuttle re-entering the Earth's atmosphere is traveling at roughly Mach 25.
Right.
That is 25 times the speed of sound. But as you see in the NE Talks shorts highlighted in our source material, Gibson doesn't just recite velocity numbers. He explains what it physically feels like to be inside a machine displacing that much energy.
Right, because Mach 25 is roughly 17,500 miles per hour. A textbook tells you that is the velocity required to maintain low Earth orbit.
Exactly.
But Gibson tells you about the thermal dynamics. He tells you what it sounds like when superheated plasma is enveloping the cockpit windows, and the entire vehicle is vibrating under the stress of bleeding off that speed through a series of massive high-G banking maneuvers.
You hear the tension in his voice. You understand the split-second decisions required at the very edge of the atmosphere.
It's not just math anymore.
No, hearing it from the person who held the flight stick humanizes the math. It reminds the audience that exploring the cosmos is a profound human risk, where the margin between a successful landing and a catastrophe is razor thin.
Which brings us to the other side of that coin. Because while the astronauts are the ones absorbing those G-forces, every single safe return from Mach 25 is orchestrated by thousands of brilliant minds anchored firmly to the ground.
That's a great point.
Gibson's stories are incredible, but they immediately raise a glaring question. How does a human survive that kind of physical trauma?
And that is where the other half of this conference comes in. To truly understand space exploration, you have to look at the ground control, the scientists, and the principal investigators.
And the Northeast Astronomy Forum ensures this perspective is heavily represented.
Oh, definitely. Looking at the 2026 roster, the breadth of ground-based expertise is staggering. You have Jerry Griffin, an Apollo flight director.
Wow.
Think about the historical weight of that role. He was in the room making the calls during the Apollo missions.
That's legendary.
It really is. You also have Michelle Thaler, a renowned astronomer and research scientist, and Kevin Schindler from the Lowell Observatory.
Okay.
They also feature David McComas, who is the principal investigator for IMAP.
What is that exactly?
For context, IMAP stands for the Interstellar Mapping and Acceleration Probe. This is a mission designed to map the heliosphere.
Which is?
It's essentially the massive magnetic bubble the sun blows around our solar system, protecting us from harsh cosmic rays. McComas is studying the very boundary where our solar neighborhood ends and deep interstellar space begins.
That is fascinating. And the forum ensures these complex missions are translated clearly to the public, too.
Yes, communication is key.
They have Emmy-nominated meteorologist Joe Rao and Master of Ceremonies Vince Coulihan guiding the event. They even brought in Ken Kramer, a journalist and photographer, to provide a critical media perspective.
Right, because the media dictates how the public perceives these missions, which directly impacts funding and support.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting. Tucked into that incredible list of ground control experts is Mike Schinelli.
Yes.
And his title in the source material is the manager of NASA's Apollo Challenger Columbia Lessons Learned program.
That is a heavy title.
That title carries a very heavy weight. We spend so much time at these expos talking about the thrill of discovery. We marvel at the hydrogen alpha solar scopes. We talk about the adrenaline of Mach 25. We dream about mapping the heliosphere.
Yeah.
But space exploration involves devastating, catastrophic tragedies. To see a program explicitly named after Apollo 1, Challenger, and Columbia represented at an astronomy expo, it is a sobering reality check.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals why this specific gathering is so highly regarded by the scientific community.
How so?
It is a comprehensive, unfiltered view of human exploration. The Lessons Learned program isn't merely an archive of what went wrong. It is an active, vital engineering methodology.
Right.
You cannot separate the triumphs from the tragedies because the tragedies built the modern safety protocols.
Can you give an example of how a lesson from something like Columbia translates into what these engineers are discussing today?
Sure. Consider the Columbia disaster in 2003, which was caused by a piece of insulating foam breaking off and striking the shuttle's wing during launch.
Right, I remember that.
The physical cause was foam, but the systemic cause was what sociologists call the normalization of deviance.
Normalization of deviance.
Yes. NASA had seen foam strike the shuttle on previous missions without critical damage, so they began to accept it as an operational norm rather than a glaring warning sign. Mike Schinelli's role is to ensure that modern engineers understand not just the physics of the failure, but the cultural complacency that allowed it to happen.
So when a modern spacecraft like the Boeing Starliner mentioned in one of the NEAF Talks shorts experiences software glitches or thruster issues, the engineers don't just patch the software.
No, they don't.
They apply the cultural lessons of Challenger and Columbia. They ask, are we normalizing a deviance here? Are we accepting a flaw just because we got away with it last time?
Exactly, and that rigorous self-examination is what fuels the future. It is This exact study of past failures that gives humanity the confidence to push forward into the next great unknowns.
Like the search for life.
Right. Questions that are also being hotly debated at this forum, like the theories posed by Sarah Seeger on finding biosignatures on other planets, or the deep dives into whether the icy oceans of Jupiter's moon Europa could harbor microbial life.
Wow, we cannot send a probe, let alone human beings, out to the frozen crust of Europa unless we have completely internalized every single painful lesson from our past missions.
Absolutely, yeah.
The entire exhibition hall at Rockland Community College represents the complete chain of exploration. The telescope vendors show you what is out there to be discovered. The astronauts tell you the visceral reality of leaving the atmosphere.
Yeah.
The scientists explain the physics of the destination, and the safety managers explain exactly how we are going to survive the trip.
It is a complete self-sustaining ecosystem of discovery. You are getting the theoretical physics, the orbital experience, the mechanical engineering, and the safety culture all interacting simultaneously.
It's amazing.
And that is exactly why 4,000 people make the pilgrimage every year.
So, as we bring this deep dive to a close, let's look at the essence of what you, the listener, would experience if you walked through those doors in April 2026.
It's going to be quite the scene.
The Northeast Astronomy Forum is clearly not just a trade show where people buy expensive lenses. It is a massive intersection of top-tier astronauts who have seen the curvature of the Earth with their own eyes, critical ground control scientists who carry the weight of human lives on their clipboards, and curious learners just like you, stepping up to an eyepiece for the very first time.
This raises an important question, though. When you gather that many people in one room purely for the purpose of looking up and contemplating the infinite scale of the universe, how does that collective experience shift our perspective on our own fragile planet?
That is the exact kind of perspective shift this gathering is designed to create. And it leaves me with one final thought for you to mull over.
Let's hear it.
We just spent time discussing NASA's Lessons Learned program. We explored how humanity's greatest leaps into the cosmos are built just as much on studying our heartbreaking, catastrophic failures as they are on celebrating our incredible successes.
Right.
So as you go about your week, think about this. If the greatest minds in space exploration rely heavily on their most devastating failures to safely map out the stars, how might the everyday earthly failures in our own lives be the exact blueprints we need for our personal next giant leap?
That's all for this month's NEAF Talks podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Remember, you don't need fancy equipment to enjoy the night sky. Your eyes, a pair of binoculars, or a small telescope can reveal wonders that have captivated humanity for thousands of years. For more information about astronomy events, equipment, and the annual Northeast Astronomy Forum Expo, visit rocklandastronomy.com and neafexpo.com. That's NEAF Expo.com. Clear skies, everyone, and happy observing.